Thank you, Admiral. So going off your earlier exchange with Peter, to be clear, the U.S. cannot say if they're confident that Israel has a clear and achievable military plan?
That is a question for the Israeli Defense Forces.
You've said you've asked them tough questions, but has the U.S. set or discussed any possible red lines?
No.
And following on that, Secretary of State Antony Blinken had just said humanitarian pauses must be considered to protect civilians in Gaza. Can you expand on that?
Can I expand on, I'm sorry?
Secretary of State Antony Blinken said humanitarian pauses must be considered to protect civilians in Gaza.
We want, as I said from the beginning, we want to see all measure of protection for civilians, and pauses in operation is a tool and a tactic that can do that for temporary periods of time.
So does that mean
that is not the same as saying a ceasefire? Again, right now, we believe a ceasefire benefits Hamas, a general ceasefire.
And just to follow up on that, so could you clarify just a little bit how you would define the difference between a humanitarian pause?
I mean, I think it's really, it's a question of duration and scope and size and that kind of thing.
Got it. Okay. And then you said yesterday, when asked about kind of what the future of Gaza might look like, that that's something that the Israelis are going to need to figure out subsequently.
And I think that they're exploring those questions about what governance in Gaza looks like long term. I just don't think that, and understandably, their focus is much more on the here and now and the operations.
And does the U.S. have a view about the legality of a reoccupation of Gaza by Israel, and whether that's a temporary thing or a more permanent thing?
I don't believe we've taken a position on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you believe that the current level of bombardment allows for the extraction or transfer of hostages?
Difficult to answer the question given that we're not completely sure about the location of each and every hostage. We're working to get more granularity on that. And we have seen now just yesterday another 2 got out. Now obviously that's just a tiny fraction of the pool that we think Hamas is holding. But we think the effort to continue to negotiate for the release of additional hostages is worth the effort. Obviously, we've got 4 now families who are going to get reunited. That's a good thing, and we think that work needs to continue.
If a pause rather than a ceasefire is what's necessary, how long do you think is reasonable to expect some of that information to be obtained?
I couldn't begin to answer that question right now.
And then Israeli officials have told CNN that they do not support any transfer of fuel into Gaza, which Hamas has said is required for any sort of deal to release hostages. Does the U.S. support that position?
Separate and distinct from the hostage situation and what we're doing to try to get them out. I want to be careful that I'm not talking about the specifics of the conversations that are going into getting these people out, lest I say something that makes it harder to do it in the future. Put that aside for a second. We have said, continue to say, that fuel is an important commodity for life and sustainment in Gaza for the Palestinian people that are still there. And we know that fuel is a precious commodity that's running out, and you need it for generators in hospitals. You need it to run the desalination pumps so that you can drink fresh water and not seawater. All of that is important. And so we're going to continue to work with partners in the region. We're going to continue to push for fuel to get in. Now, look, that said, I said this again yesterday, we certainly understand Israeli concerns about the possibility for Hamas to abscond with fuel and use it for their own purposes and not allow it to be used in hospitals and desalination plants. We understand that. That is a legitimate concern, no question about it, which is why, again, Ambassador Satterfield is on the ground working this so hard. There's a balance here that has to be achieved. Obviously, we haven't achieved it yet, but we still believe, just in general, that fuel needs to be able to get into the people of Gaza.